Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Life of a Business Manager podcast. This is the podcast where we break down the real world skills that every business manager needs to succeed. I'm your host, Sina Chan, and in today's episode, we're breaking down the 6 practical tips for business managers out there and what you should know to become more organized, more productive, and more of a confident business manager in your current role. So, whether you're a new business manager or aspiring business manager, this episode is for you. So, let's get to it. Alrighty, everyone, let's go into segment 1, which is why most management advice misses the point. So, before we dive into today's tips, I wanted to talk about something that's always bothered me about management advice. So, if you've ever searched how to become a better business manager or pick up a leadership book, you've probably heard the same advice, which is, for example, be a good listener, lead by example, communicate openly, or empower your team. And none of the advice is wrong, but it's incomplete because no one tells you what those things actually look like when your department is over budget, when you have 2 employees that are in a conflict, or when you are having to answer to leadership by a certain time period, or if you're juggling multiple priorities all at once. And that's the reason why I started this podcast. So, throughout my career as a business manager in healthcare operations, I realized the best leaders weren't the loudest or the most charismatic people in the room. They were actually the ones with the best systems. And when I mean systems, they had the best systems for communicating, making decisions, running meetings, follow up, and holding people accountable. That completely changed the way that I viewed business management. And being a great business manager isn't about your personality and it's not about building skills. Most of what I've learned didn't come from a textbook. It actually came from real life experiences, managing large budgets, leading operational projects, collaborating with cross functional teams, and learning from plenty of mistakes that we've all made along the way. And every challenge has taught me something that I could improve for the next time. And that's what today's episode is all about. I'm not going to give you the generic leadership quotes. I'm actually going to share practical systems that you can start using immediately to become a more effective business manager. So let's jump into the first tip. Okay, everyone, let's dive into segment 2, which is tip number 1, and that is set expectations before you set deadlines. So, with this tip, I think is very crucial to your success as a business manager because obviously all tips are practical and useful, but if you can master this one, it will help you being a business manager much easier to manage. And one of the biggest mistakes that I made early in my career as a business manager was assuming that people knew what I meant when I worked on certain projects or when I worked with cross functional teams. I would actually explain the task, give a deadline, and think we're all aligned in a meeting. And then a week later, the project would come back and it wasn't what I expected. And this wasn't due to the team or the employee itself wasn't capable or didn't care. It was because we had 2 different definitions of what done actually looked like. And that experience taught me an important lesson. And that is clarity is a business manager's responsibility. So, as business managers, we have context that our employees and our stakeholders don't actually have. We've been in all of these leadership meetings, we read the emails, we understand the bigger picture, but sometimes we don't communicate that context. And people are forced to make assumptions when we don't communicate it properly. And assumptions are expensive. They create confusion, rework, missed deadlines, and frustration for everyone involved. And I saw this firsthand when I was managing large healthcare operation projects is whether we were opening a new clinical space or coordinating across finance, nursing, IT, or facilities, one misunderstanding could actually delay an entire project. And the teams that actually succeeded weren't necessarily the smartest. They were actually the ones with the clearest expectations. So here's 4 simple questions to help you set expectations before setting deadlines. So the first question is, what does success look like? Second question is, what's out of scope? In other words, what shouldn't you spend time on? The third question is, who else needs to be involved? And the fourth question is, what's the deadline and should we schedule a quick check in before then? And the reason why I recommend the fourth question is because that mid project check in is one of the best habits that you can develop as a business manager. A 15-minute conversation halfway through any project can prevent hours of revision later on during the project. It's much easier to make a small adjustment on day 3 of the project than it is to redo an entire project on day 10. So over the years, I've realized that most people don't fail because of lack of motivation or talent. They actually struggle because expectations weren't clear from the beginning. So remember this, when you're explaining a task, it's not about just explaining the task. You have to create alignment. And alignment happens when everyone leaves the conversation with the same understanding of what success actually looks like. Those extra 2 or 3 minutes that you spend setting expectations upfront can save you hours of follow up, rework, and unnecessary stress. And that's tip number one. Okay, everyone, let's go to segment three, which is tip number two. And this is something I wish I had learned much earlier in my career, and that is to do weekly check ins that actually work for you. Make your weekly check ins count. For example, a lot of managers have one on one meetings on their calendar, but they're really just status update meetings. And you've probably heard conversations like this where you're asking, what are you working on? Any updates? Any blockers? Okay, it sounds great. And 15 minutes later during that meeting, you didn't actually manage and you also didn't collect any information. And those aren't great one on one meetings. So, one on ones shouldn't be about status updates. They're actually an opportunity for you to build trust, remove obstacles, and help your employees succeed. I learned this while managing projects and assisting teams in healthcare operation. The people doing the work usually see problems long before leadership does. They know where processes are breaking down, where communication isn't working, and what's slowing the team down. But if you only question what's the status, you're only going to get part of the story. Instead, try asking these three simple questions in your next check in meetings. So the three questions are number one, what's going well? Number two, what's harder than it should be? And number three, what do you need from me? It only takes about 15 minutes, but those three questions can completely change the quality of your conversations during the meetings. Sometimes your employees need an approval, a decision, or an introduction to another department. Other times they need clearer priorities, more feedback, or simply someone to just help them through a challenge. And over the years, I've learned that employees don't expect their managers to have every answer. What they do expect is someone who will listen, provide support, and help create a path moving forward. And the thing is, when people stop giving you status update and start sharing what's really happening, that's when trust grows within your team. And that's when you become a better business manager. So that is tip number two. Let's go to tip number three. Okay, everyone, let's go to segment four. And this is tip number three, which is to protect your time as a business manager. And this is one where every business manager should learn sooner than later. Protect your time because nobody else is going to do it for you. Some of you might know, but the moment you become a business manager, your calendar starts to feel like public property for everyone. For example, you might get asked these questions a lot. Do you have 5 minutes? Can you jump on a quick call? Can you look at this before the end of the day? And the funny thing is, every single request is quick, but 30 quick requests in a week adds up to so many hours of lost time. And I've had these days where I was busy from morning until evening answering emails, attending meetings, solving problems. And then I realize I haven't even touched my actual work and it delays my department moving forward. And that's when I learned an important lesson, and that is being available isn't the same as being effective. As business managers, we're often the connection between leadership, finance, operations, and our teams. People come to us because they trust us, and that's part of the job, but we're always reacting. We never have time to think strategically. So, one thing I've learned is that protecting your time doesn't mean you're unavailable. It actually just means you're intentional. And that's why I block two types of times on my calendar every single week. So, the first one is deep work time. So, this is protected time for the work that requires deep focus. For example, budget planning, financial analysis, process improvements, preparing leadership updates, or thinking through complex decisions. Because as business managers, you're paid to do more than respond to emails. You're actually paid to analyze, solve problems, and make informed decisions. And that requires uninterrupted time, deep work time. The second time is buffer time. So let's be honest here, unexpected issues are just part of being a business manager. A deadline can change, a project needs more attention, or someone just needs your help. If you don't leave room in your schedule for those moments, they'll take over the time you set aside for your most important work. So here's the question I want you to ask every single week is your calendar reflecting your priorities or everyone else's priorities? Because the best business managers aren't the ones who respond to the most requests. They're the ones who create the biggest impact. And creating impact requires time to think, plan, and lead a team. And that is tip number three. Okay, everyone, let's go to segment five, which is tip number four, and that is the 10-minute daily planning routine. So, build a 10-minute daily planning routine and do it before you open your inbox. And it sounds simple, but those first 10 minutes can determine whether you lead your day or you spend the entire day reacting to everyone else's priorities. And think about how most your mornings start. Typically, you open your laptop, you check your email or your Teams, and immediately someone needs something from you. Or leadership wants an update from you, or a team member has a question, or a meeting gets added to your calendar. And before you know it, your day is no longer your own. I've experienced this throughout my career in healthcare operations, where there's never a shortage of urgent requests. The challenge is that if you start every day reacting, you'll stay in reaction mode all day long, and that is not productive of your time. So that's why I recommend taking 10 minutes every morning before opening your inbox and focus on these three things. The first is to identify your top 2 or 3 outcomes for the day, not tasks, but outcomes. Because as business manager, your job isn't to complete tasks, it's actually to create results. The second is decide when those outcomes will actually happen. For example, look at your calendar and block time to complete your most important work. If you don't schedule time for your priorities, your inbox will fill your calendar for you. And the third is identify anything time sensitive. Review your deadlines, your leadership requests, or commitments that can't be missed. It only takes a few minutes, but it helps prevent important work from getting buried once the day gets busy. And here's what I've learned over the years is the most effective business managers aren't the ones who work the longest hours. They're actually the ones who are intentional about where they spend their time. So, tomorrow morning, before you open your inbox, give yourself that 10 minutes to decide what success actually looks like for you. Protect your time for your priorities and then start responding to everyone else because your goal isn't to create the perfect schedule. It's to make sure you're leading your team instead of letting your day lead you. And that is tip number 4. Okay, everyone, let's go to segment 6, which is tip number 5. This is a quick one, and that is to tame your email, your requests, and your admin work. Build a simple system for the administrative side of your job. For example, emails, requests, and approvals, all of it, because this is the stuff that quietly eats hours of your time if you don't control it. And it's a super easy fix. The fix isn't a fancy app, it's just a rule. For example, when you open an email or a request, I would recommend doing 3 things immediately. So the first one is to respond if it's under 2 minutes and if it's quick. The second is to schedule a specific time to handle it if it's not quick. And the third is to delegate it if it's not actually yours to do. What you don't want to do is read it and then close it again. That's how 100 unread messages become a complete Tuesday afternoon disaster. This is a small thing that makes a huge difference. And I wanted to add this tip because it's small, but it's impactful. So set 2 or 3 specific times a day to process email and requests instead of leaving it open all day. Your daily job duties isn't to focus on emails, requests, and admin work. It's actually to be impactful as a business manager. And if you're getting pinged through your inbox all day, that is challenging for you to focus on strategic projects that you need to move forward with. And that is tip number 5. So super quick and short, but it will make a huge difference in your day. Okay, everyone, let's move into segment 7, which is tip number 6, and that is run productive meetings that actually support your job. So, this is something I think almost every business manager can relate to, and that is fix your meetings. Because for many business managers out there, meetings can quietly become one of the biggest challenges in managing your time. And the tricky part is that meetings are not necessarily bad. In fact, a lot of meetings are very important. For example, you might have meetings where you create alignment, where decisions get made, or where teams solve problems, share information, or move important initiatives forward. But the problem happens when meetings start replacing the actual work that those meetings are supposed to support. And I've experienced this throughout my career, especially in operations. Your calendar can fill up very quickly. For example, you might have leadership meetings, cross functional meetings, project meetings, financial reviews, team meetings, or any type of discussion that anyone decides to add to your calendar. And before you know it, your entire day is a series of conversation in these meetings. And then you look at your clock and you realize that the work that actually requires your actual focus, which is reviewing financials, analyzing data, or preparing recommendation or improving process improvements, still hasn't been touched. So these are the changes that I recommend to run a productive meeting that supports your job. The first is every meeting you own needs a clear purpose and a clear outcome. So, this might sound simple, but it can completely change the quality of your meetings. For example, a lot of meetings right now have very vague titles like weekly sync, team update, touch base, check in. But those titles don't really tell people why they're there and why you're meeting. So you want to have strong titles with clear questions. For example, you can add these questions such as what decisions need to be made, what problem needs to be solved, and what outcome should we have by the end of the conversation. Part of it is because you really want to make sure that you are having a productive meeting and you're not wasting your time in these meetings and just having random discussions. Because the one thing that I encourage you to ask yourself is, does this conversation actually require a meeting? Because sometimes the answer is no. Sometimes an email, a shared document, or a quick message can accomplish the same thing without taking 30 minutes of your time from 10 different people. And one of the most valuable things that you can do as a business manager is to respect people's time. Your team's time matters, your colleagues' time matters, and your own time matters. So make sure you utilize that effectively in order for you to run a productive meeting. So, the second change that I recommend is to protect at least one meeting free block every day. So, even if it's only 60 to 90 minutes, block that time, protect it, and treat it like it's an important meeting for yourself because it is. This is your time to do budget analysis, to do reports, strategic planning, process improvements, follow ups, or preparation for another meeting. These are the things that are often determine whether you are simply managing today or improving tomorrow. And I learned this lesson when I realized that being available all day doesn't necessarily make you a better business manager. Sometimes the most valuable thing that you can do for your team and yourself is to step away from all the noise in order for you to think clearly. So take a look at your calendar this week. Ask yourself, are my meetings helping me do my job, or are my meetings preventing me from doing my job? Because meetings should support your job and not consume your time. And the goal isn't to eliminate meetings. The goal is to make sure every meeting has a purpose, every conversation creates progress, and you still have enough time to do your important work that happens outside the meeting room. So that is the last tip number 6. Let's close out this episode. Okay, everyone. Before we close out the episode, let's recap today's tips for all the listeners out there. So these tips will help you manage people and your daily job duties. So tip number 1 is to set expectations before you set deadlines. Tip number 2 is do weekly check-in that actually works. Tip number 3 is protect your time as a business manager. Tip number 4 is the 10-minute daily planning routine. Tip number 5 is to tame your email requests and your administrative work. And tip number 6 is to run productive meetings that support your job. I hope all of those tips are helpful for anyone listening out there. I hope you get to try one this week and let me know what changes for you. Okay, everyone, that is it for today's episode. Again, thank you so much for tuning into another episode of Life of a Business Manager podcast. If you found today's episode helpful, share it with another business manager out there or any manager who's probably experiencing the same problem. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. And if you haven't already, make sure to follow the podcast, leave a review, and connect with the Life of a Business Manager community online. And if you have any questions about the role, suggestions for future topics, or stories of your own, I'd love to hear from you. You can find my email in the show notes below. As always, thank you so much for listening, and don't forget to subscribe. Until next time, bye everyone.